Welcome to the Pansa Pansa Forum. In the Yoruba language, the word pansa is usually injected into poetry to express an uncomfortable, uncensored, and inconvenient truth. The Pansa Pansa Forum is candid conversations about the life of African immigrants in America as it relates to their adaptation to their new home. While some may find it easy to integrate and can balance between retaining the original African culture while accepting the culture of their new home, many continue to struggle to find a balance between both worlds.
Hello and welcome to Pansa Pansa Live. This is a podcast where we discuss the lives of African immigrants and their assimilation into Western society as they raise younger generations in a country that is quite different from their own. We also explore the experiences of children of immigrants as they balance the African and Western cultures. We present to you this informative, interesting, and expansive dialogue about the intricate experiences of African immigrants in America.
Welcome to Pansa Pansa Podcast. I'm your host, Kemi Seriki, and today I'm having conversation with Jaamil Olawale Kosoko, a Nigerian American author, performing artist, also is a Yoruba and Natchez origin from Detroit. Guest anyway. So welcome to Pansa Pansa again, Jaamil. I'm so delighted that you are here and you're having this conversation on this platform and having a connection with me. So as I always ask my guests, can you fully introduce yourself, talk a little bit about your background to our audience as to where you were born, where you spent most of your childhood and adult life?
Yeah, by way of introduction, well, you mentioned, I'm from Detroit. That's where my mom and dad met and, made me. I'm a child of the 80s, Reaganomics and all the things that came with it. Inner city Detroit in the late 80s, 90s was an intense time, to say the least. And, there was just this time where all of this talk about don't do dope, and I don't know, it was just a very specific kind of rhetoric that was being pushed out, criminalizing Black people, Black men. Yeah. But, I grew up in a home that a lot of stuff was happening. It was a environment where every day it just felt like, oh, what's going to happen, today kind of thing. But, long story short, I left Detroit at 15 to go to art school, Interlochen Arts Academy, where I studied writing and would later go on to study performing arts and theater and dance. And I went on to college. I went to Bennington College in Vermont, where I continued, the literary arts and art history. I worked professionally, and I still do, but early on in my career, I worked for a number of different artists and just creative people, just to really get my skin in the game a bit and to learn the ins and outs of the field that I was going into. Basically, up until now, for the past 16, 17 years, I've been making work professionally, and right now I'm at a point in my life where I'm grateful that my work is well known enough that, museums and galleries and spaces, various institutions invite me to show my work and to share it, internationally. So that feels really, really exciting.
It is. It's great. Yeah. I can't wait to come and see you anyway. I'm going to talk about that later on. So Can you talk about your two powerful cultural heritage, the Yoruba and the Natchez? For those who may not know, what does it mean to continue to embrace both heritage?
Well, it was important to me to just acknowledge that African American doesn't really mean anything. I mean, it's a symbol, but, you can put a lot under Africa and America, and I know that, on my mother's side, the Natchez Indian of Mississippi, the native people, the Natchez tribe is very prominent. So she's a mixture of Natchez native blood, if you will, and And
Native America before the white came in.
Exactly, you know. But then there's also some mixed blood heritage and things that we just don't, we don't know what's cooked in that pot, if you will. And then my father, of course, who is from Nigeria and Yoruba. So that sort of is the combination there. And, and I would say that both traditions really have meant something to me. And I'm continuing as I get older to better understand what these traditions really mean and how I might go about just learning more and doing the work that I need to do to just better understand, my full heritage.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm so happy and proud that you continue to embrace both. Before we dive into a more complex topics, I would like us to talk about, which you mentioned before, your present profession and career. You're a performing artist and educator in many universities. When I came across you, we were teaching at Princeton at that time. And you also taught in Stockholm University as well, in France. Presently, you are in UCLA. I wonder when you are coming back to to New York City, where you actually belong.
Exactly.
Okay. Can you talk about how your academic path prepare you for the position you occupy today?
So I'm no longer at UCLA, but I was there in 2020. I was the third annual visiting chair, Alma Hawkins visiting chair lecturer in World Arts and Cultures dance. And so that was an incredible opportunity to work and, just share my work with this other environment, inside of this other environment and educational system. I learned and I continue to learn so much about myself through the process of teaching. But right now, I've not been teaching consistently at a specific institution, but I will be going back to Princeton in the spring. Yeah, while I'm not, necessarily at one specific space, I do sort of rotate. There's a handful of institutions that I work at and rotate because, it's important for me to have a sense of freedom and autonomy and to be able to do the work that I want to do and to follow that trajectory and not necessarily inherit some curriculum that I don't really care about, that's dated. And all of these opportunities, I really get to design my own syllabi, my own curriculum, and really share with the students what I enjoy the most about this work, this kind of work. Yeah.
That's a freedom right there, that you create your own syllabus, and it's a freedom of knowledge. And I wish many universities will follow through the same. So as a performing artist, how would you describe your performance to me, who have not seen, only on the YouTube video I've been watching? And to those who may never have seen your show before, how would you describe it?
Yeah, I work a lot with image making. There's a kind of embodied poeticism that feels really exciting for me to share with an audience. My work tends to really be a mixture of visual art, performance, music, moving image. So I sort of borrow from all of these various genres to create a genre that is of its own. And so depending on an idea that I'm exploring, that really determines the way in which I'll go about expressing that idea. My book recently came out earlier this year. And so now I'm in the process of converting or adapting the book to a staged production. So it's important for me to always just be in this conversation of adaptation, translation, transmutation, just what it means to kind of exist in between. I don't want anyone to be able to look at my work and be like, oh, I know what that's about. You know what I mean? It's far more complicated. Exactly. It's not easy.
You're rather
Yeah.
surprised.
Gotta
And that's
surprise
great.
them.
It's a great thing. I was supposed to see your performance in New York City before COVID derailed and crippled the whole world. And I've been able to see some of your performance on YouTube and Instagram. Your performance seems intense with physical and sometimes emotional expression. You use a lot of colorful fabrics, costume you presented. What I also observe in your performance is your ability to push against the cultural boundaries through your performances. You bring forth gender identity, queer, blackness, black struggle. Can you expand more on what inspire or who inspire these specific focuses? The thought process or popular culture you're trying to challenge?
For sure. I feel like so much of my work is challenging American coloniality, this sort of status quo that is so pervasive and so incredibly limiting psychically and mentally. I'm really proposing that as Black people, we are so incredibly powerful, and have the ability really to do whatever we want to. And it's that magic that's in us, that is of us, yet, for whatever reason, because of the society that we live in, there feels to oftentimes be this system that's really placed against Black bodies, for some reason. And so it becomes really important for me to highlight, some of the struggles and challenges, but also the beauty and the magnificence, the grandeur that comes with living in the crossroads, at that critical axis. As an American Black person, there is a kind of cachet on the global stage that comes from that. And that's something that I've become more aware of as I tour and travel my work more internationally. I've sort of become a kind of ambassador, speaking and creating towards just hidden histories and certain erasures that we don't really get to see on the global stage when it comes to the ways in which Blackness is being performed and sort of observed and witnessed inside of certain contexts. So much of this work, I'm trying to describe myself and really write myself into being, into another kind of reality and possibility for who I can be.
How is your work received in global world when you perform in another country apart from the United States?
Oh yeah, pretty well, honestly, but whenever you put up a show in another country, there's a lot of legwork that you have to do, a lot of foundation work, a lot of planning. And so, oftentimes before I arrive to any country, a certain amount of legwork has happened to advance a project, if you will. So, if I'm doing a residency or a performance, members of my team, myself, we will have already reached out to the curatorial staff, the technical team. We've already sort of figured out housing and accommodation and hospitality. So we've laid a foundation for the work and how it's to be witnessed and discussed. We've sent along descriptions and syllabi and things to read and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of advancing that happens before a project gets in front of people in another culture. But it's usually really well received. Of course, I've had some gigs that didn't go over so well, but I don't know. I wouldn't say it's necessarily my fault per se. I think there's just certain places that have not done that work of undoing coloniality, and so certain things that they can't see really. So it's not really, sometimes it doesn't quite land. But more often than not, if I've been invited somewhere, it's because the work is really sort of hitting a particular kind of register that would be important for that community.
Yeah, I can't keep up with you with your performance and you're an author. There's so many publications attached to your name. Your latest book is called Black Body Amnesia, Poems and Other Speech,
Yep.
Acts Syllabus for Black Love, Chameleon, a syllabus for Survivor, right? Creative Life Art, Crisis in the Gallery, Black Male Revisit, and many more. Can you talk a little bit about all these publications? Because I said, where does Jaamil get this energy to do all this work, as well as teaching, publication and performances, and you travel all over the world?
Well, it is a team. And that's the thing about, I think, being an individual artist is that you don't see a lot of the organizing and administration and, a lot of the leadership work that I'm doing, behind the scenes to get these various projects moving. And, I do have to say no to stuff. I'm asked to contribute, to write something and contribute to various publications and things like that. And as an academic, I do want to work consistently at a place. So if I am to apply for tenure, I have to have a certain amount of writing and publication, under my belt. So I think, that's a part of what keeps me so busy. But also, writing is my foundation. I feel like the writing is what happens before you see the performance and all of these other sort of projects. I'm always sort of doing that work to better understand what's happening now and in the future. I think what's interesting is this year, as an example, all of the projects that have come forward, these are projects that I had been working on throughout the pandemic,
Wow.
So I had a lot of time, a lot of downtime, if you will. So, I mean, we all found ways, creative ways, to keep ourselves busy. And so that's what's happening now.
That's good. So who are your major influence in your work and your writings?
I look a lot at, Black feminist writers, Bell Hooks and Audre Lorde. I think of Horton Spillers and Lucille Clifton. I'm also, really inspired by, the work of Toni Morrison.
Yes.
There's so many inspirations that come to me, But I would say the biggest inspiration really has been this memory of my brother and really just trying to keep his legacy as active and alive and present. His spirit active feels really important. And it's something that is, remnants of him and his memory are in so many of the projects, that I do. So I know that's something that is also motivating me because I don't want his death to have been in vain.
Wow, that's so powerful. So I want to bring you back to Chameleon.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw the syllabus with your cute baby picture in front. I said, oh my God, I need to get a copy of this. So cute. And it's like the face didn't even change too much anymore. What does Chameleon symbolize in your work and in your performance? And have you ever tried to connect it to what it might symbolize in Yoruba tradition?
For me, the chameleon, it represents something about transformation. It represents something about existing between the human and the animal. I just always being reminded that I do have an ability to transform and to camouflage, to return to the land. All of these are kind of symbols for me. I've not done that work yet, but it's inside of the research, this new project that I'm working on that I'm calling, a working title of it is Nigerian Butterfly. And it's in memory of my father, who I lost a few years ago. And with that project, I know like it requires me taking a lot of these symbols and iconographies that have registered and landed for me in this particular context and unpack them in Nigeria in an African context. And so this is work that is on the horizon for me
Wow.
that I'll be doing hopefully next year. I see myself getting a Fulbright to study more and to continue this research on the continent. I have to develop this work.
Yes. And in Nigeria, you will find people who will support you for that, especially digging into the Yoruba, the symbols and the meanings of this. Because in Yoruba, chameleon actually is called Oga, which is connected with Agemo Orisha. Orisha is like a spirit. And then they connect it with Egungun. Egungun is the masquerade. Have you ever seen the picture of Egungun in Yoruba?
I'm sure I have. I've had that.
It's part of, the performances. Every year they do the performance. But the Agemo in itself represent the ancestor that they already passed on. And the Agemo represent that figure that takes care of the children that is left behind. So that's what Agemo Egungun represent. And they usually celebrate it around July in Ijebu-Ode. Have you dig into your family name also, Kosoko?
A little bit. When I do that research, I know it has such a wealth of history and information. But I've never actually set foot on Nigerian soil. My father, for whatever reason, just did not really teach me so much of the traditions, and so I'm having to do a lot of that, myself. Yeah,
because the Kosokos were very powerful people in Lagos. Oba Kosoko was a ruler of Lagos in the 18th something in Lagos at that time, and it was very powerful. And the family continued to expand. They actually have their own masquerade in Lagos, Eyo Kosoko, and they have their Iga, the Kosoko Palace in itself. So they are very powerful people in Lagos. They're very popular and powerful people in Lagos. They call them the Lagosians. Yeah, one of the. So I just want us to talk a little bit about your background, specifically your dad, and how I came across your story. So in 2017, I came across Jaamil Olawale Kosoko while listening to a terrible Thanks for Asking. And the title of the episode was called, What Does All This Loss Mean? In the story, you talk about the death of your mom, your sister, your grandmother, your uncle, your brother, and later your dad. Most of these deaths occurred before you were 16-year-old. And especially the women in your life passed on before you were 16. As you said during the story, even though both your parents, when they were alive, you still felt like an orphan because your father was never present. And when he was, he could not provide for you, both financially and emotionally. Your mother also struggled with mental illness and physical health before she passed on to join the ancestors. And all this traumatic childhood experience, you were able to connect and accomplish professional artists and so much accolades attached to your name. And when I listened to that story, my heart sunk. I was so full of sadness, thinking, how can one person go through so much traumatic experience? And then in the podcast, you said something so powerful. You said your story is not unique. You quoted James Baldwin. How do you extract positive from adversity?
I think, grief has an incredible ability to transform. I think we as humans, we have this ability to transform really any kind of situation. And I had to make a decision, I think we all have to make a decision. Either we will be victims or survivors. That is really that simple. And I chose to be a survivor. I chose to live up to my name, Jaamil, which means beauty. I really have had to do a lot of healing work, a lot of therapy. Yeah, just all the things, and I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to do this work because it's what helps to inform the other work that I do, that I share in front of people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot has happened and a lot will happen, and I know that I'm not my history. It's a part of me, but it's not the be all end all. I'm always in the process of writing, myself into being, and to writing new chapters, and to moving deeper towards my vision. So yeah, I just made a decision, not to be a victim anymore. And that was one of the most powerful decisions I think I ever could have made, was to start a process, a deep process of forgiving, and to start a process of what I call forgetting, and I think so often we think about forgetting as what we have lost. And I'm thinking about forgetting as what is yet to come, and what we can literally forget within our reach, that we want to bring into manifestation. So that's been something that I found really, really powerful, in the paradigm shift that I've had to take on in order to, move into, my fullest potential of myself.
That's so powerful. And when you say forget, you're not meaning forget about it. You just meaning for, what is, coming forward,
Exactly.
coming your way to get. Because people might listen to it and say, forget, coming your way. And that's that's so poetic what you just said, because I never thought about it that way. Because I just want to, clarify that, something coming your way. That's so powerful. And I understand your grandmother was your rock. And she was the source of your stability after your mom joined the ancestors. And then she passed on later on, and you moved in with your father. You had to locate him.
I did.
There was nobody else to live with. How did you locate your father at the time? And at what age do you move in with him?
Exactly. I really had to become a bit of a young detective. This is a time when there is no social media, so I'm having to really use landlines. This is still the time of landlines and telephone books, and just like calling one person to get the lead on this other family member who might know. And I just was calling, I called my aunts and uncles and brothers and just all the people who I thought might be able to let me know, do you know where my dad is? Do you know where my dad is? And lo and behold, he was living literally right around the corner from where I was at the time. And so, yeah, literally, I just went and knocked on the door one day, and he came down. I mean, he couldn't say no. I mean, maybe he could, but he chose not to. Alhamdulillah. And so that was the year that we were forced to learn about each other, and that we lived together, and that was that was right before I left and went off to boarding school. It was a hard year, to be completely honest, but for whatever reason, I was able to get what I needed, and I got myself that application, and I got myself to art school, and that was really the beginning.
So how was it like living with your father? Somebody you had no prior relationship with, or how was the relationship like when you moved in with him?
It was difficult because, poverty makes everything difficult.
Yes.
Had we had money, it would have been a much different reality. But because we were so poor, it just really complicated everything. Every part of the experience, really. Like winters were particularly difficult. I'm thinking about no hot water, and, the refrigerator that wouldn't work. And there was just always something. It was a very difficult time. And then I was able to find, this amazing school. And so what ended up happening was I would spend a couple months there, then I would have to go home for the holidays. So I would be caught in between where on one hand, there was like this incredible privilege
Yeah.
that was really just something like I'd never experienced before. And then I would go home and into this incredible amount of poverty. So it was just, this really strange kind of seesaw that I was on for a while there.
How did you balance it being in an environment that is extremely wealthy with children, mostly, white children who are on the upper class echelon, and coming to your back home and then, live in this environment? How do you balance both worlds whereby your feelings didn't shed over on both sides?
The beautiful thing was I knew that I had to change my environment. That was one of the first steps to changing my future, was to be in a different location, to be in a different like social environment, and to be able to really focus. So when I'm not worried about how I'm going to eat or will I have hot water, those basic things, once that was really taken care of, I could really focus on my studies, maybe even, making friends and being active on campus life and doing, being like an admissions ambassador and like hosting the Black History Month, celebration and, just all these various ways that I could contribute. I was the vice president of the student council. There were just like all these ways that I could be present, so there was a kind of forgetting that I think I was in the midst of practicing while I was there. But of course, when Christmas or whatever would come, it was a time for me to go back to Detroit. So I would go and my brother was also there at the time living with my aunt. And so, I would go to be with him, just to check in on him and, because he was really what I was doing all this for at the time, moreover than myself. But it was like, I'm really the only option that we have because he was 10 years younger than me. So it was interesting, trying to find that balance. But the more that I was able to spend time at Interlochen over those 2 years, I was able to really do a lot of healing and to start, just correcting some of the imprints that I had received earlier on in life.
I mean, I think, you have some such extra gift that the ancestor actually gave you, because if it's somebody else, they might not. The strength that you were able to have, that you went through all this and look at you today, many people may not even have that kind of strength to go on. I mean, it's so commendable. And I'm still waiting for your memoir. I'm still waiting for your memoir. I know you wrote memoir, but I'm still waiting for it will be New York Times bestseller, because I think it will help so many people. And did your father ever talk about some of the struggle he may be experiencing at the time, or the challenges that he was going through as an immigrant? Because to be an immigrant in this country, there's so much challenges living here, because you don't have your extended family. Even, let's assume I'm a Nigerian among other Nigerians, it's not the same as being back home, because everybody is also struggling on their own. It could be loneliness, the disappointment that, the reason why I came to America is because I want to achieve certain things and it's not being fruitful. So it could actually lead to depression. And sometimes in our society where we came from, we don't consider that part of what we need to heal or talk about. Sometimes we're giving up on ourselves without realizing we actually gave up on ourselves.
Yeah, I know he suffered from depression. I mean, looking back, that's the only thing that it could have been. Yeah, there were days when he just wouldn't want to get out of bed. And I get it, I think there were other days when he would get out of bed just because he knew like something needed to happen, some kind of like rhythmic shift needed to occur. But, now it's interesting, like understanding that and looking back at how difficult it was, for my dad, of course, as an immigrant, as you say, but he wouldn't confide in me in that way. Yeah, I think there were a lot of like masculinist sort of behaviors that he performed. So, he wasn't like, no crying. I don't want you to see me crying. I don't want, to see me depressed. I don't want you to see me, So it was this way that I think through a kind of removal, because he wasn't where he wanted to be. And when you're not spiritually aligned, it's hard to invite people, into that world. So I know that at this particular point in my life, I'm correcting a lot of curses, and there's a lot of corrective work that's happened and that continues to happen.
I understand. We come from a society back in many places in Africa, whereby men don't really express their vulnerability. Even the society tell you to man it up. To look at yourself. Men won't be seen crying. In Yoruba, they say, be like a man. Don't show emotion. I just want to explain the culture to you. It may not be because it was actually being macho, or it feels like I'm not going to tell you anything. First of all, it might not want to tell you because it might feel you wouldn't understand. And it might also feel so down that, look, I can't even provide for my own son. Look where I find myself. Okay, I should have been a father to be able to provide. And coupled with, many other emotional issues, thinking back at people back home that even if I go back home, what will I show that I've achieved? It is part of those challenges that you won't be able to express. Maybe if he had had other Nigerians around or trusted friends of his age group, he may be able to tell them, this is how I'm feeling about things, But being that it was only you, I don't know whether he had other people around that actually come around at that time to see him or visit him or something.
Rarely. He had a brother who would come every other blue moon that I would sometimes, see. But yeah, it was very distant. It was just very distant.
Yeah. So, and what you just said is part of what many immigrant children whose parents came from Africa are actually expressing that, they complain through this podcast, many of them that have actually spoken to that our parents, their parents don't express their feelings. Even mine also said the same thing. We don't know what you're going through. We don't understand how you're feeling sometimes, So it is part of that aspect of culture that we have to start working on and changing the way we express ourselves or show vulnerability even to our own children. That, we cannot do this. This is what is going on with us. So after you left for college, did you ever have contact with him?
Or did
he contact you?
Yeah, he came to visit me once or twice while I was in college. I remember at least once him coming. I think because, again, poverty, he was able to get himself there, but I believe he would either sleep in the car or I'm trying to think, was there like a couch in the living room? But all I can say is that, usually when parents come for, long weekend or, alumni weekend or whatever, you get the hotel, a lot of these things that we take for granted, but he just wasn't able to do that. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
But at least he came.
Yeah, he came, he came like once, but he did not come to the graduation, unfortunately.
Wow.
So that was really difficult because, it's not every day you graduate from college.
Yes.
And it was something that he really he really was so adamant about, I want you to graduate from college.
Yeah, that's the joy of every night. Even if they have to borrow money to come to that graduation and take picture and show their chest like this and say, my child just graduated.
Yeah. So I know it was difficult for him not to be there, but But it was difficult for me too, because there was like literally no one came to my college graduation. And so it's just things like that, but again, you have to practice forgiving and just moving on.
Yes.
You just have to.
When he moved back to Nigeria, when did he move back? Did he ever have contact with you after he moved back to Nigeria?
He did, because at that point I was making far much more money than him, and he needed support by that point. So he kept in touch. I would send money home to him and stuff when I could, but I was still very much, a young person in America trying to, take care of myself and do all these things. But I managed to be able to send $50 here, $100 there, $200 there. Yeah, so we kept in touch, But I sometimes wonder if we would have. I just made some decisions that I don't think he was excited about, maybe, or something. But I have to live my own truth, and that's the other part of all this. I can't live for anybody else. If there's anything that he taught me was I literally can't live for someone else. I have to live for myself.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did.
Wow. That is really powerful. How did you know when he passed away in Nigeria? Who contacted you?
Well, it was my sister's husband, I believe. They were at his hospital bed, essentially. And they were just WhatsApping him, in like essentially from his deathbed. And so I got all these images and these pictures, of my father dying, essentially, which was difficult. There was a time there when I didn't want to open up my phone because all of these like images were so hard, to look at. But I worked with this visual artist to recreate his portrait.
Wow.
So that was really important, to take this final image of him and to make it beautiful and something that, I could put on my wall. And so in Chameleon, actually, in one of my pieces, there's a portrait of my mom and my dad, and I'm sort of sitting in between them on the couch. That's one of the lead images. Those are ways in which, I kind of take some of these very difficult experiences and like rewrite them, reimagine them, and turn them into a sort of image, a scenic design or a beautiful image, in a film or a live project.
So you didn't have his picture when he was here? You didn't take any picture together with him?
There was like a few. Again, he wasn't very present, so you don't have those sort of memories, and he just wasn't there. So had he been more present, we might have had more photos, but unfortunately, no, although I do remember us being like at the movies one time and like going to the photo booth. I must have been 11, 12 or something at the time. But no, unfortunately, again, when you're that poor, I just don't think, taking photos to document how poor you are. I don't know if that's, you know what I mean? It's just not something that seems...
Even if it's the face, but, I understand what you mean around that time, because it wasn't something that you will actually think of actually doing. Do you know about your siblings before he got to Nigeria, or are they younger than you or older than you?
I have an older sibling who is still there. She's married and has, I think, either 3 or 4 kids that are growing. And so, we try to stay in touch. But again, she's this person that I've never met. It's this strange thing where you have this sibling and you should be close to this person. But, we've never met. I don't know her. Yeah, so that's something that still working through right now.
And then he has other younger children after he got to Nigeria?
No, I think he slowed down. Like, he had the 2 of us. Okay. I don't think he had any more because... Yeah, I'm like, why? I think he thought, why? He can't afford to pay for them, so why have any more?
I mean, there are many that they will get back to Nigeria, they will find another wife and have more children and then become children for other people to feed and take care of. So it was very wise of him at that time to decide that that's enough. So in the podcast, you talk about learning towards post-traumatic enlightenment, the resilience and post-traumatic growth you later achieved through all this experience is really commendable. I don't even know how you're able to do it. Would you mind sharing with those who may listen to this podcast how you're able to achieve this positive outlook in life, positively moving forward? Talk about life appreciation, relationship with others, personal strength, and spiritual change. Because, one thing I see from many videos that you shared on social media, you build your own village. And it is so powerful. I just want you to be able to share that.
Yeah, post-enlightenment, post-traumatic enlightenment. Again, I think going back to that same idea earlier, just around, making a decision to either be a victim or a survivor. And so it was very important to me. I always knew that greatness was in my destiny.
Yes.
And it's really just been a matter of me doing the work that I need to do in order to share that, that greatness and just to fulfill that destiny. And I'm so incredibly grateful to have a life now that allows for that to be, my reality. It was a lot of work, a lot of therapy, a lot of going back and doing a lot of root work and just unpacking a lot of trauma so that I could let it go, so that I could let it go, so that I could learn it, understand it, and learn from it so as to not replicate it, That's really the space that I'm in now. It feels almost surreal, but it really is a beautiful life. I've been able to construct a really beautiful way of being in the world and traveling and kind of just curating for myself a life by design on my own terms. And that's all we can really ask for at this point. But yeah, it wasn't easy for sure.
It can be. And I like the fact that I keep saying that you connect with other people as well, who also came into your life, and you created other families through other people. Because for me too, as somebody of immigrant in this country, raising 2 children by myself, I've been a single parent for over 20 years, raising my children by myself. One thing that I found out is that I have to create my own village.
Yes.
You may not even be among my fellow Nigerians or Africans, but to extend myself to other community as well, who could actually offer their wisdom, offer the help, and whatever I too could bring in, I did the same. So that's very powerful that you're able to do that for yourself as well, because, we're all human, whether black or white, Asian, any color, we're all human. Yeah, you find humanity in others, no matter where you go. Because especially as an open person yourself, you're always open. I remember when I sent you, I said, when I listened to this story, I said, let me just look for him. I'm just going to send him the email because, I was crying. I said, this is so unfair. This is so sad, And I sent the email and immediately you reply me back in a humble way. Yeah. And I was so impressed by that. I said, I have to continue to get in contact with Jaamil. Yeah. And when you sent me the other email that I missed for 2 months, I said, how dare me? Yeah. I missed the email again. And that time we're supposed to meet in New York. I can't wait. We still have to meet. Yes. When you come to this area, whether in New Jersey, I will find you. I'll come and meet you anywhere you are. Don't even worry. Even if I have to come to your class at Princeton, I will be there. I will be in class as a student because I want to see you actually teach. So listening to your story on the podcast, you indicated that your mom named you Stephen Mercedes Anderson. That was the name that was printed on your birth certificate. But when you visit your father, he calls you Jaamil Olawale Kosoko. And that is the identity that you carry today. Because if it's somebody else, they will say, this man didn't really do too much for me. Why am I carrying this identity? Why do I need to continue to carry this on and have the memory taking over? If I may ask, why do you decide to claim your Yoruba heritage, especially your Nigerian identity?
That was one of the things that happened when I lived with him for that year, was the name change. It was legalized during that year. But again, this was me as a young person, like 14, 15, going down to the Social Security office by myself to get a Social Security card and to get my name corrected and things like that. So it was just a different time. When I think about all the kind of stuff that I did as a young child, stuff that I don't think you could do now, but there was just this will, you know, like the will to get that application and apply to Interlochen, the will to change my name, the will to get out of Detroit and, you know, really change the road I was on and how I was sort of moving through my life. All of that stuff. I'm so grateful, but it was important to me because it felt right.
Yes.
You know, like Stephen never really felt right to me. It always had been when I was at school, the teachers would call me Stephen Anderson or whatever. So, you know, during the day at school, I was like, Stephen was kind of this character or something. And then when I was at home, it was Jaamil, and that felt right. You know, my mom and my dad called me Jaamil, but it just so happened that Stephen was who was on my birth certificate. So Jaamil always really felt accurate. You know, that felt like my name. That was the name that I received as my name.
Because you are beautiful both on the inside and the out.
Yes.
And Olawale, you know the meaning of Olawale?
Olawale. No, tell me.
Olawale, Ola is wealth.
Wealth.
Wale, come home. A wealth has come home.
Wealth, come home. Yes.
That's what it means.
Yeah.
So Jaamil is beauty on both on the inside and the out. You know, so you carry both at the same time. So I just want to, if you can offer one advice to our community. There's so many issues regarding race relation in the United States. And many African immigrants have to navigate through the system that is so foreign to their parents. Many have difficulties in navigating through diversity of space existing in America, including white space, sometimes black space. Because sometimes, African Americans or people from the Caribbean sees you as others as well, or even in the Asian community or Latin America and many more. As someone who is exposed to diversity of community, what advice would you give to African immigrant children trying to navigate through this diversity?
So much of it for me was just what I was able to learn and the community I was able to have to support me, in these various transitions. You can't do it alone. It's really difficult. It's not impossible, but it's much easier if you have community. And so I would say find other children of immigrants that were born in the US and other spaces, like we're in this place now where you can find like digital community to like support and, talk through things. So having your people is really important. Like as you mentioned, something that you see with me is this village that I'm sort of creating of performance makers and artists and educators and just eccentric kind of people. And I would say find your people. You don't have to be alone, that you can do this work in community, and it's much easier, I think, to do it in community as well, a kind of maroonage, if you will.
Because even though we have issue of race in America, there's no give and take. You still have to navigate through other spaces as well.
Exactly.
And whether you want to work in a corporate world, somebody like you in performing art, also as a professor, you deal with diversity of different people in academia, in administration, and in professor, in the classroom as well. That's so powerful that it's okay to be able to extend ourselves. And you just have to understand, African American call it code switching.
Yeah.
You code switch in different areas and then be able to connect to that. So do you have any question for me?
I guess I'd be curious to know, what have you really learned? And it seems to me that you've devoted so much of your work to mending the cultural divide between immigrant parents and children. And, so what strategies would you say you've taken away to lessen that divide, that communication gap?
Yeah, what I've been trying to do is through my own experience with my children also, because like I said before, as a parent, you only going to raise your children according to what you understand, what you grew up with. So one thing I will also mention, I didn't have my children until over 10 years later that I came to this country, compared to other immigrants that is either they have children, start having children immediately, or they wait a while. So me being here for over 10 years and not having children allow me to actually understand, okay, there's a difference in terms of immigrant experience, how you have to raise a Black child in America, and working through different organizations, integrating into different communities, Black communities, white communities, and understanding that, listen, your culture is within your own house. No matter how much you impose your culture on your child, is only within your house or your community. Your next door neighbor have different value system that that child has to battle with. Okay, so it's part of what I'm trying to explain to the parents that we need to understand, and it's part of my calling, I would say, through raising my children in this country, as well as being exposed to other children as well. Allow me to understand that no matter value system that we brought from home, we still have to battle with the dominant culture that is outside. So it's part of having this conversation with many of our youth and having parents listen to it, as well as understanding that this is the reality. We're not a visitor in America. Because many of us have the mentality of a visitor, that we just came here to visit, even though we're spending 10, 20, 15 years, even some as much as I've been here since the 1980s, early 80s, I came to this country. So no matter what, your connection is still in this country, because the children born in this country, there's probability that they're not going to go back. This is their home, and you still have that connection. So how do we then break that cultural barrier that tends to separate parents, that tend to limit us from being vulnerable and telling our children? My children are the type that they will tell me within no time. Even in my communication, if they see my body language or I'm not answering them. And what you also said about your father, my children already told me that before, that we don't even know what is going on within you because you keep quiet about your feelings and everything. So it's now that they are grown that I'm trying to communicate with them to let them know. It's because I don't want to burden you, and I don't think you could help me, because I might put another pressure on you, because you then have to worry about how I'm feeling on the inside, whereby my major focus is for you to be successful and better person in terms of, being able to do for yourself, finish school, and set up your career. So I don't want anything to disturb that. So it's part of that communication that I'm expanding within the community, also reading books about first generation who are actually writing their experience in this country, reading the book and then doing a review according to our cultural belief and what these children are saying, and then have it also published, because many of our children are actually having a lot of emotional challenges that parents don't even understand on how to navigate towards being able to address all those challenges that their children are facing. They might say, pray about it. When you pray, everything should be better, or just ignore it. At least misunderstanding about what emotional challenges or mental health is all about. Because they'll say, what would you be depressed about? You have food to eat. You have electricity. You turn on the water comes out. You don't have to go and fetch water. And I'm providing everything for you. So what is it that you have to be depressed about? So it's not something that we actually recognize that it has to be addressed. And sometimes other parents also suffer from the same issue, from PTSD. It might be also intergenerational trauma that they had back home, and then they came here with it, and they are not realizing that it's actually affecting them also. So they are not saying that their trauma have an impact on their children, on the way they actually raising their children. So it's all that conversation that I'm having. And I believe by actually starting this podcast and interviewing many of the younger generation, when parents listen to it, might be an example for them to actually understand some of the struggle our children are going through.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your work and for doing this research, and for sharing it. You know, it feels really important, and it's such a pleasure, to be in conversation with you.
Yes. So how can our listener connect with you online or on social media, those who may want to connect with you?
Sure, yeah, you can visit my website, jaamil.com, JAAMIL.com. You can also find me on IG at Jaamil_means_beauty. Jaamil means beauty on Instagram. Yeah, those are really the best ways to stay up to date, with my work and follow the adventures of Jaamil.
Thank you so much, Jaamil, for coming. There's an African proverb that says, a tall tree can never prevent the sun from shining. And when someone sees all your achievements, they may never know the challenges you experienced or you went through from your childhood. Jaamil Olawale Kosoko, you came from a very powerful heritage. African American and Nigeria, specifically Yoruba heritage. Just to let you know, Yoruba is a very rich culture as it relates to our language, our traditional religion, art, music, and dance. So I could see that, in some of your performances. We're one of the largest ethnic groups in Nigeria and in Africa. Okay? You will find Yoruba people not only in Nigeria, but in Togo, in Benin, in Brazil, Cuba, Trinidad, Tobago, and South Carolina as well. Those who continue to embrace their Yoruba tradition. So I'm so delighted and proud that you continue to embrace your heritage, the tradition that produce a beautiful person, both on the inside and out. I'm so happy about that. I'm so proud of you. So Pansa Pansa continue to normalize conversation about the importance of community engagement, about African immigrant experience, issue of race and identity within our community. As I always say, as we continue to discuss uncomfortable dialogue in our community, we're shredding away the stigma that associated with uncomfortable dialogue. So Jaamil, I really want to thank you for your generosity, your vulnerability in sharing your experience with me today, and those who may be transformed into the enlightenment after listening to what you have to say today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Pansa Pansa Live Podcast. We hope to have you back with us in the next episode as we continue to explore the nuances of the African immigrant experience. If you'd like to connect with us, you can email us at talk@pansapansa.org. That is talk@pansapansa.org. And follow us on Instagram at pansa.pansaforum. Until next time, remember to spread kindness and love. Thank you and take care of yourselves.